As the Jin capital of Chengdu fell to the Mongols, Chinggis Khan returned to Mongolia, where his attention was drawn to new threats. Over 1216 and 1217, the northern border of the Mongol Empire threatened to unravel as revolts spread across the forest tribes of Siberia, while the Merkit tribe, the oldest enemies of Chinggis, gathered around the figure of Khotu, with new allies in the Kipchak tribes. Who knew how far this forest uprising could spread, or even reopen tribal fissures within Mongolia which had lain dormant since 1206, while Khotu could offer a new foundation for resistance with the aid of the Kipchak. Chinggis needed to act, lest his empire suddenly be torn apart from underneath him. Resistance was centered around the Tumed, the Kyrgyz, and the Merkit under Khotu, which led to separate campaigns we will examine in succession. And while the Kyrgyz resistance was related to the Tumed, there was little, if any, coordination between these revolts. It should be noted that the chronology of many of these events is uncertain, and dates will change depending on the sources, which often confuse these with other campaigns. I have chosen that which to me makes the most sense chronologically. The Tumed had, like many of the forest peoples around Lake Baikal, submitted to the Mongols between 1205 and 1210. The animal skins and hunting falcons they brought were prized by the Mongols, and were expected to provide these along with men for military service. However, Mongol rule must have felt quite tenuous to the Tumed, as they were very distant from the Mongol-dominated steppe, and it is easy to imagine them resenting having to send their goods and men so far south to Chinggis Khan. With Chinggis absent in China, the atmosphere must have grown ripe for these tensions to flare up. Things were set off when Chinggis's lieutenant, Korchi of the Ba'arin, went to the Tumed to claim 30 women. During Temujin's rise, Korchi had told a prophecy of his eventual victory, earning himself the good graces of Chinggis Khan. As reward for his service, he was granted the right to take 30 Tumed women, which he happily accepted. Korchi rode merrily to the Tumed in 1216, at that time ruled by Boruki Tarkan, the widow of the former chief. Korchi's arrival was poorly received. The Tumed were right pissed and captured him. Chinggis was not happy to learn this, but, wanting to avoid sending an army north, sent Kudaka Beki of the Oirat to negotiate Korchi's release. Kudaka Beki was a loyal chief of an Oirat tribe, more familiar with the forest peoples than Chinggis was, and could hopefully bring a peaceful resolution. The Tumed, however, took Kudaka prisoner too. This was a declaration of war, and Chinggis responded by summoning Naya Noyan to lead an army against the Tumed. Naya fell ill, so the responsibility was given to one of Chinggis's 4 steeds, Borokul of the Khashin. Borokul had long been a close confidant of Chinggis. Raised by Chinggis's mother Olun, he had become the Khan's cupbearer, high steward, and commanded a part of the imperial bodyguard. Chinggis had great trust in Borokul, and anticipated a quick victory and the rescue of Korchi and Kudaka. The attack in 1217 did not go as planned. Borokul and 2 followers riding in front of the main army were ambushed and killed by Tumed scouts. Chinggis was furious and ready to lead a retaliatory force himself. Mukulai, at that time planning the campaign against the Jin, and Borochu were able to convince Chinggis against doing so. Other matters had made the scope of the problem far more apparent, as orders for the Kyrgyz on the Yenisei River to commit troops to aid the expedition had been ignored. The revolt against Mongol rule was spreading, and needed to be crushed quickly. The death of a high-profile follower of Chinggis like Borokul could not be unpunished. The task fell to Dorbai Dokshin of the Dorban Mongols, instructed by Chinggis to set the army in strict order, pray to eternal heaven, and strive to subdue the Tumed people. Rather than take the main routes as Borokul had done, to avoid ambush, Dorbai traveled through deer trails, cutting roads as needed. It was a total success, for the Tumed were feasting when suddenly Mongol horsemen fell upon them. A heavy punishment was taken out upon the Tumed. 100 Tumed were sacrificed to Borokul's spirit. Khwarezm got his 30 maidens. Qara-khitai was given the chieftainess Boruki Tarkan as a wife, while the rest of the Tumed were spread across the empire as slaves. Chinggis took Borokul's children into his household, and was said to have always given them special attention. Qara-khitai aided Chinggis' eldest son Jochi in collecting the submission of the other tribes, such as the remaining Oirat, Buryat, and Tuvans, before crossing the Yenisei River and forcing the vassal tribes of the Kyrgyz into submission. Once the Kyrgyz were isolated, they had no choice but to submit to the Mongols, their chiefs bringing white falcons, white stallions, and black sable coats to Jochi as tribute. Qara-khitai was rewarded with a Mongolian princess for his son, while Jochi was praised and appointed governor of Siberia. The next campaign, against the Merkits, took place in similar time to those mentioned. As Christopher Atwood has demonstrated, Jochi took part in the Merkit campaign as well, making the exact order of events somewhat confusing. Chinggis' son-in-law Tokuchar was sent as vanguard against Kodu and the Merkits first, so it is possible that Jochi met with Subutai after the defeat of the Kyrgyz and together marched west to join Tokuchar. The Merkits had long held a special place in Chinggis Khan's heart. Their chief, Toktoabeki, had kidnapped his wife Borte back in the 1180s, and from then were steadfast enemies of Temujin. Toktoabeki and his son Kotu had allied with Jarmuka in the war against Temujin. After the proclamation of the Mongol Empire in 1206, Toktoabeki was the nucleus around whom the resistance to Chinggis Khan gathered, including his son Kodu and the remaining Merkits, and Kuklug, the son of the late Khan of the Naiman. In 1208, Toktoabeki was killed, leaving Kodu and Kuklug on the run, hotly pursued by Mongol forces. Kuklug fled to the qara-khitai Khanate, where in 1211 he usurped control. After being driven away by the Uyghurs, Kodu and his Merkits made their way to western Kazakhstan, intent on joining the Kipchaks, a loose federation of Turkic tribes who controlled the grassland from Ukraine to Kazakhstan. Kotu fled to the Oblari Kipchaks north of the Aral Sea, who refused the orders of the Mongols to extradite him. Subutai and Jochi took the forces of the Mongol Empire on their furthest trek west yet, meeting with Tokuchar and, with about 20,000 troops, on the Gem River in late 1217 or early 1218, the Merkit Kipchak force was defeated, Kotu falling in battle. Kotu's son, Kulkultan Mergan, a famed archer, was captured not long after. Jochi, eager to see Kulkultan's skill, set up targets for him, as all Mongols admired the most skilled of archers. According to Rashid al-Din, Kulkultan shot an arrow into the center of the target, followed by another which, in Robin Hood fashion, split the first in twain. Jochi was impressed and sent a message to Chinggis requesting permission to retain Kulkultan as part of his retinue, perhaps thinking that in light of his recent service that such a mercy may be allowed. Chinggis Khan, however, was never famed for his mercy to his enemies. "I have stored up so many realms, armies, and peoples for you. What need is there of him? For an enemy of the state, there is no place better than the grave." The Merkits were deeply hated by Chinggis, and to let a relation of the despised Toktoa live was unacceptable. Jochi was forced to kill the hapless Kulkultan, and it is easy to see this as being another knock in the relationship between father and son. The uncertainty around Jochi's paternity came to a head in the following years, and events such as this must have helped to break down their relationship. Still, under the watchful eye of Subutai, Jochi carried out his duty for the Khan. Jochi's force stayed for some time in the west. In 1218 he defeated another Kipchak force, survivors from the previous battle at Uyuk, somewhere in western Kazakhstan. Having performed their task, Jochi and Subutai began the long trek back to Mongolia. En route, however, they had an encounter which shaped the history of Western Asia. Sometime in 1218 or 1219, Jochi and Subutai inadvertently met with one of the Earth's most powerful monarchs, Shah Muhammad II of the Khwarezmian Empire, the ambitious ruler of much of modern Iran and Central Asia. The sources differ on why the Khwarezm-Shah had come so far north, perhaps chasing the Mongols, the Kipchak-Merkit alliance, or to confront his father-in-law, a Kipchak Khan named Kadir. Either way, somewhere along the Irtish River at Kuli, for the first time Khwarezmian and Mongolian forces confronted each other. Heavily outnumbered, perhaps 3-1, Jochi and Subutai informed Shah Muhammad that they had no quarrel with him, and only requested free passage. Shah Muhammad was never terribly skilled at on-the-spot decisions, and refused. Perhaps he did not trust the Mongols to not raid his territory on their way, or perhaps just pride got the better of him. Either way, the Shah drew his forces for battle. Both sides were mainly cavalry armies, featuring strong contingents of horse archers and heavy cavalry. The Khwarezmians fielded many Turkic tribes in their force, including Kipchaks, but Iranian cavalry and infantry were likely present. The battle was fiercely fought over the course of the day, the right wings of both sides pushing back the opposing left. Jochi, commanding the Mongol left, was injured but rescued. The battle lasted until evening, when darkness forced the combatants to pull apart. Under the cover of darkness, the Mongols lit many fires to appear to be setting up camp, and departed. By morning, they were long gone, and Shah Muhammad was left looking over a body-strewn battlefield. Shah Muhammad was said to have been shocked by the fierceness of the Mongols. Since becoming Shah, he had developed quite a military reputation, though more due to luck than skill. But despite heavily outnumbering the Mongols, they had not only matched him, but pushed his forces back. The Shah is said to have developed a phobia of sorts, terrified to face the Mongols in open battle, which heavily impacted the course of the Mongol invasion of Khwarezmia. Around this time, he would also have learned of Kuklug's death and the final destruction of the qara-khitai Khanate, meaning that he now shared a border with his frightening foe. When Jochi and Subutai returned to Chinggis sometime in 1219, they brought word of the Shah's attack. Christopher Atwood suggests that Jochi must have returned around the time Chinggis also received news of further treachery by the Khwarezmians. In 1218, a caravan of merchants sent by the Mongols to the city of Otrar had been killed by the Shah's uncle in Alchuk. It is likely the Shah's consent was received, but had occurred before the confrontation with Jochi. By 1219, Chinggis Khan was now forced to do battle with a foe who had now lashed out twice. The great Khan would not allow him a third strike. Before that famous invasion is looked at, first though will be our discussion of Jebei's hunt of Kuklug and the conquest of the qara-khitai.